There is a moment that arrives quietly, without announcement, when you realize the rules have changed. Perhaps it comes when you rise from a chair and notice the stiffness that was not there a few years ago. Perhaps it arrives during a walk that once felt effortless but now requires a different kind of attention. Perhaps it surfaces in the middle of the night, when sleep does not come as easily as it once did, and your mind begins tracing the contours of what might lie ahead. These small shifts are easy to dismiss as simply aging, as though growing older were a single uniform process that everyone experiences in the same way. But this assumption, reasonable as it seems, overlooks something essential. Not everyone ages at the same rate. Not everyone loses function at the same pace. And not every change we attribute to time is, in fact, caused by time alone. There is a distinction, rarely made in casual conversation, between the passage of years and the condition of the body that carries those years. Two people of the same age can be in completely different states, one vibrant and engaged, the other diminished and struggling, and this difference is not explained by luck or genetics alone. Something else is at work, something that has to do with how the body has been supported, challenged, and nourished across decades. What if the slow decline you have come to accept as inevitable is actually something more negotiable? What if the body, for all its complexity, follows certain principles that can be understood and supported? What if the difference between aging well and aging poorly lies not in some secret treatment or exotic intervention, but in a return to fundamentals that have always been true but have been quietly forgotten? These are not questions answered by any single discovery. They point toward a different way of thinking about the entire journey, one that begins not with what you might add to your life, but with what you might finally understand about how the body actually works. You are listening to the Longevity Library, where we archive the wisdom of healthy aging. The architecture of aging. Understanding your body's long game. There comes a moment, usually quietly and without announcement, when the body begins to speak in a different language. It is not the language of illness or emergency, but something more subtle, a slight shift in recovery time after exertion, a different quality to morning stiffness, a sense that the rules have changed in ways no one fully explained. For those who have crossed into their fifth decade, this new conversation with the body becomes an increasingly present companion. The temptation, when these changes appear, is to search for the single thing that will restore what has been lost. A supplement, perhaps, or a specific diet, or an exercise protocol promising to reverse the years. This search for the singular solution reflects a deeply human desire for simplicity in the face of complexity. But the body, particularly the aging body, does not operate through single switches or solitary pathways. It functions as an integrated system, a vast network of interdependent processes that have been fine-tuned over millions of years of evolution. Understanding how to support this system as it ages requires stepping back from the search for magic bullets and instead examining the underlying architecture of how we change over time. What actually happens inside the body as the decades accumulate? Why do some individuals maintain vitality well into their later years while others decline more rapidly? And what patterns of living appear consistently among those who age with greatest resilience? These questions have occupied researchers, philosophers, and physicians for centuries. Only recently, however, has the science matured enough to offer coherent answers. Answers that point not toward any single intervention, but toward a constellation of supportive practices that work together in ways both predictable and deeply personal. The cellular story of time. To understand aging, one must first appreciate that your body is not a single entity, but a community. Approximately 30 trillion cells comprise the average adult human, each one a living unit carrying out countless chemical reactions every second. These cells form tissues, which form organs, which form systems, all coordinated through communication networks more complex than any human-made technology. Within each cell, tiny structures called mitochondria serve as power generators. They take nutrients from your food and oxygen from your breath and convert them into the energy molecule that drives virtually every cellular process. This molecule, known as ADP, powers your muscles, your thoughts, your digestion, your immune defenses, everything that constitutes being alive. The mitochondria accomplish this through an elegant assembly line of chemical reactions. Along this assembly line, a critical molecule called NAD shuttles electrons, facilitating the energy conversion. Think of NAD as a reusable battery that gets charged and discharged continuously throughout each day. When functioning optimally, this system produces abundant energy while generating minimal waste. But time introduces complications. As decades pass, several changes occur simultaneously. The number of mitochondria in your cells may decline. The ones that remain become less efficient. The recycling of molecules like NAD becomes less complete. And perhaps most significantly, a molecule called CD38 tends to increase with age. And this molecule actively consumes NAD, diverting it from energy production toward other purposes. The result is an energy deficit that affects every system. When mitochondria cannot produce sufficient ADP, cells must either reduce their activity or attempt to compensate through less efficient pathways. Tissues with high energy demands, brain, heart, muscles, immune cells, feel this deficit most acutely. Fatigue becomes more common. Recovery takes longer. The margin for error narrows. This understanding has led researchers to examine what supports mitochondrial health and NAD availability. The answers point consistently towards certain patterns of living that appear to slow or moderate these declines. The molecules that matter, within the vast complexity of human biochemistry. Certain molecules play particularly important roles in how we age. These are not mysterious compounds found only in exotic supplements, but familiar substances that have been part of human nutrition for all of our existence as a species. Niacin, also known as vitamin B3, serves as the primary building block for NAD. Without adequate niacin, the body cannot produce sufficient NAD regardless of how many other supportive measures are taken. This places niacin at the foundation of cellular energy metabolism. The story of niacin deficiency provides a striking illustration of how diet and health intertwine. In the late 19th and early 20th centuries, a disease called pellagra reached epidemic proportions in parts of the United States and Europe. Its symptoms, dermatitis, diarrhea, dementia, and eventually death, puzzled physicians who assumed they were dealing with an infectious agent. Only gradually did researchers realize that pellagra resulted from diets consisting almost exclusively of corn. Yet corn had been a dietary staple for centuries among indigenous populations in the Americas without causing pellagra. The difference lay in preparation methods. Traditional cultures soaked their corn in lime water overnight, a process that alkalized the grain and freed the bound niacin for absorption. When industrial milling removed this step, the niacin in corn became unavailable, and deficiency disease followed. This historical lesson carries relevance today because it demonstrates that nutrient availability depends not only on what foods we eat, but on how they are prepared and combined. The same principle applies to many aspects of nutrition for aging adults. Beyond niacin, other compounds influence the aging process through different mechanisms. Sulforaphane, found abundantly in cruciferous vegetables, activates cellular defense systems that protect against damage and support detoxification. Anthocyanins, the pigments that color blueberries and purple cabbage, function as antioxidants and anti-inflammatory agents while also supporting mitochondrial function. Curcumin from turmeric influences inflammatory signaling and activates protective genetic pathways. Quercetin from onions helps clear senescent cells, sometimes called zombie cells, that accumulate with age and secrete inflammatory compounds. Omega-3 fatty acids from fish support cell membrane function and help resolve inflammation. Each of these compounds contributes to the larger picture of how cells maintain function over time. None works in isolation. They operate as an integrated network, supporting different aspects of cellular health while depending on one another for full effect. The wisdom of food choices. If molecules are the actors in this cellular drama, food provides the script. The choices made at each meal determine which molecules are available for the body's countless daily transactions. Organ meats, particularly liver, contain the highest concentrations of niacin found in any food. This makes nutritional sense from an evolutionary perspective. Our ancestors, who could not afford to waste any part of a hunted animal, consumed organs along with muscle meat, obtaining concentrated nutrition that supported their high-energy lifestyles. Liver provides not only niacin, but also other B vitamins, iron in its most absorbable form, copper, vitamin A, and numerous other nutrients that become increasingly important with age. Grass-fed red meat follows closely behind organ meats as a nutrient-dense option, despite decades of dietary guidance suggesting limitation. Properly raised red meat offers complete protein, highly absorbable minerals, and substantial B vitamins. The quality of the meat matters considerably. Animals raised on their natural diet of grass produce meat with a different fatty acid profile and higher nutrient concentrations than those fed grain in confined operations. For those who prefer not to consume animal products, nutritional yeast provides a practical alternative. This deactivated yeast, available in most natural food stores, contains naturally high levels of B vitamins and can be sprinkled on foods or incorporated into recipes. Its savory, slightly cheesy flavor makes it particularly useful for those transitioning away from dairy. Fermented foods deserve attention not only for their probiotic content, but for their enhanced nutrient availability. Raw sauerkraut, particularly when made from purple cabbage, provides niacin alongside beneficial bacteria and anthocyanin pigments. Quality yogurt, especially when traditionally prepared, offers similar benefits. The fermentation process can liberate nutrients that might otherwise remain bound and unavailable, while also introducing microorganisms that support digestive health, and digestive health, in turn, influences how well nutrients are absorbed from all foods. Cruciferous vegetables, including broccoli, cauliflower, Brussels sprouts, cabbage, and their relatives, provide sulforaphane precursors along with fiber, vitamins, and minerals. Broccoli sprouts contain the highest concentrations, followed by radish sprouts and mature vegetables. The key to obtaining sulforaphane's benefits involves allowing time for the enzymatic reaction that converts precursors into active compound. Chopping or chewing initiates this process, which is why properly preparing these vegetables matters. Berries and purple cabbage deliver anthocyanins with the advantage of relatively lower sugar content than many fruits. Blueberries and blackberries work particularly well for this purpose, offering concentrated pigment along with fiber and other beneficial compounds. Purple cabbage can be eaten raw, cooked, or fermented, providing flexibility in how it is incorporated into meals. Turmeric, the bright yellow spice common in Asian cuisines, contains curcumin. Traditional preparations almost always include black pepper, which contains piperine, a compound that dramatically increases curcumin absorption. Fats also enhance uptake, which explains why curry dishes prepared with oil, coconut milk, or meat provide more benefit than simply adding turmeric powder to water. Onions, among the most common and affordable vegetables, provide quercetin in exceptionally high concentrations. Red onions typically contain more than yellow or white varieties, and the outer layers hold the highest amounts. Minimal peeling and regular consumption. Onions with eggs. In salads, cooked with other vegetables, ensure steady intake. Fatty fish, particularly smaller species like sardines, mackerel, herring, and anchovies, provide preformed omega-3 fatty acids. Wild salmon also serves this purpose well. Canned cod liver offers an especially concentrated source, providing not only omega-3s but also vitamins A and D, which often become marginal in aging populations. The pattern behind the foods. When these foods are viewed together, patterns emerge that point toward broader principles of eating for long-term health. These principles transcend any single nutrient or food and instead describe an approach to nourishment that has characterized traditional diets across many cultures. The first principle involves eating from the whole animal. Traditional cultures wasted nothing, consuming organs, bones, skin, and blood along with muscle meat. This practice ensured that nutrients present in different tissues, often in complementary patterns, all found their way into the human body. Modern eaters who limit themselves to muscle meats miss the concentrated nutrition found in organs, which evolution designed to store and process precisely those nutrients that active tissues require. The second principle involves fermentation and preparation. Nearly every traditional culture developed methods of fermenting, soaking, sprouting, or otherwise preparing foods to enhance their nutritional value and reduce anti-nutrients. These techniques, developed through trial and error over centuries, reflect an intuitive understanding that raw ingredients often require transformation before they optimally nourish the human body. The lime treatment of corn that prevented pellagra represents one example among thousands. The third principle involves diversity within seasons. Traditional eaters consumed whatever was available locally at different times of year, creating natural variety that ensured exposure to different compounds over time. This seasonal cycling may matter more than any single food choice, as it prevents both monotony and excess while aligning intake with the body's changing needs across the year. The fourth principle involves the primacy of whole foods. Traditional diets contain no isolated nutrients, no extracted compounds, no laboratory creations. Every molecule came packaged with its synergistic partners, the fibers that moderate absorption, the fats that enhance uptake, the cofactors that enable utilization. This packaging, refined through evolution, matters in ways modern food science is only beginning to understand. The context beyond food, however precisely one eats. Food alone cannot carry the full weight of healthy aging. The body exists within a larger context that includes movement, rest, social connection, and environmental exposure, each of which influences how effectively nutrients are utilized. Physical activity stimulates mitochondria in ways that nothing else can. When muscles contract, they send signals that trigger the creation of new mitochondria and the improved function of existing ones. This effect extends beyond muscle tissue. Exercise-induced signals benefit mitochondria throughout the body, including in brain and heart tissue. The key involves consistency rather than intensity. Daily movement, even at moderate levels, provides more benefit than sporadic vigorous exercise followed by prolonged inactivity. The type of movement matters less than the fact of moving. Walking, gardening, dancing, swimming, strength training, yoga all stimulate beneficial adaptations when performed regularly. Variety may offer advantages, as different activities stress the body in different ways, prompting broader adaptations. But for most people, the greatest challenge is not optimizing the type of movement, but maintaining any movement at all. Sleep represents the other side of the activity coin. During deep sleep, the brain clears metabolic waste, consolidates memories, and regulates hormones that influence appetite, stress response, and tissue repair. Mitochondria undergo maintenance and replacement during rest. Immune cells patrol more effectively. The entire organism resets for another day of activity. As people age, sleep often becomes more fragmented and less restorative. This is not inevitable, but results from patterns that can be addressed: irregular schedules, evening light exposure, stimulating activities too close to bedtime, consumption of caffeine or alcohol late in the day. Protecting sleep requires the same intentionality as protecting nutrition, and for similar reasons. Social connection, long considered a matter of emotional well-being only, increasingly reveals itself as physiologically significant. Isolation correlates with elevated inflammation markers, poorer immune function, and faster cognitive decline. The mechanisms likely involve stress hormones, which remain elevated when social support is lacking, and the absence of the calming influences that positive interactions provide. Maintaining meaningful relationships, participating in community activities, and staying engaged with others supports not only mood but basic biology. Environmental exposures accumulate over decades in ways that influence aging trajectories. Air pollution, particularly fine particulate matter, triggers inflammation and oxidative stress that accelerates cellular aging. Contaminants in water and food add to this burden. Chronic noise elevates stress hormones. Even indoor air quality, affected by cooking methods, cleaning products, and building materials, contributes to the total load the body must manage. Addressing these exposures does not require retreating from modern life, but involves making informed choices where possible, using ventilation when cooking, choosing simpler cleaning products, spending time in green spaces where air tends to be cleaner, filtering drinking water if concerns exist about local supplies. Small reductions in exposure, accumulated over years, may meaningfully reduce total burden. The rhythm of days, when nutrition, movement, rest, connection, and environment are considered together. They describe not a checklist, but a rhythm, a pattern of living that aligns daily activities with the body's needs and capacities. This rhythm, once established, requires less conscious effort to maintain than any isolated intervention would demand. Mornings might begin with movement before food, allowing the body's natural cortisol peak to support activity while delaying breakfast until after exercise. This pattern, sometimes called time-restricted eating, gives the digestive system a prolonged overnight rest and may support metabolic health. The specific timing matters less than the consistency. Bodies adapt to patterns maintained regularly. Daylight exposure early in the day helps set circadian rhythms that influence sleep, hormone release, and metabolism. Morning light signals the biological clock that day has begun, initiating a cascade of timed events that unfold over the following 24 hours. Even on cloudy days, outdoor light exceeds indoor lighting by orders of magnitude, making a brief morning walk disproportionately valuable. Meals, when they occur, provide opportunities for connection as well as nourishment. Eating with others, even when the meal is simple, engages the social nervous system in ways that solitary eating does not. Conversation slows the pace of eating, allowing satiety signals to register before overconsumption occurs. The shared experience itself carries value independent of the food consumed. Afternoons often bring a natural dip in energy, which many cultures honor with a brief rest period. This pause need not involve sleep, sitting quietly, gazing at nature, or engaging in an undemanding activity can restore focus and energy for the remainder of the day. The modern expectation of continuous productivity conflicts with basic human biology, which operates in pulses rather than straight lines. Evenings benefit from winding down, reducing light exposure, avoiding stimulating content, engaging in calming activities that signal to the nervous system that the active phase has ended. The blue light from screens particularly disrupts the melatonin release that prepares the body for sleep, making device use in the hour before bed counterproductive for rest quality. Weekends and seasons introduce longer rhythms. Periodic fasting, practiced in many traditional cultures for religious or practical reasons, may offer metabolic benefits beyond those of daily eating patterns. Seasonal foods naturally vary, providing diversity that supports different aspects of health at different times. The rhythm of years includes periods of greater and lesser activity, more and less social engagement, times of challenge and times of recovery. The individual variation, however well described any pattern of living may be, it remains a generalization that must be adapted to individual circumstances. Bodies differ in their capacities, tolerances, and preferences. Medical conditions impose constraints. Medications interact with foods and activities. The optimal approach for any person will differ from the optimal approach for any other. Digestive capacity varies considerably among older adults. Some individuals tolerate raw vegetables without difficulty, while others find cooked versions more comfortable. Some handle dairy products well throughout life, while others develop lactose intolerance with age. Some thrive on higher protein intakes, while others with kidney considerations must moderate their consumption. These differences are not failures, but variations, the expected range of human diversity expressing itself over time. Food sensitivities and allergies require attention. Gluten, dairy, eggs, nuts, and other common foods trigger reactions in susceptible individuals, and these reactions can mimic or exacerbate age-related complaints. Identifying and avoiding trigger foods, when present, provides more benefit than persisting with foods that cause symptoms simply because they are considered healthy for the general population. Medications interact with nutrients in ways that matter. Blood thinners require consistent vitamin K intake, making dramatic changes in green vegetable consumption problematic. Thyroid medication works best when taken separately from calcium-rich foods or supplements. Diuretics affect mineral balance. Statins may influence coenzyme Q10 status. Anyone taking prescription medications should understand these interactions and plan meals accordingly. Existing health conditions shape nutritional priorities. Diabetes focuses attention on carbohydrate management. Hypertension encourages sodium awareness. Kidney issues require protein and mineral monitoring. Gout may necessitate moderating purine-rich foods. Autoimmune conditions sometimes respond to elimination diets that identify triggers. The general principles of healthy eating apply, but they must be filtered through the lens of specific medical circumstances. Personal preferences determine what can be sustained over years. No diet works if it includes foods someone dislikes or excludes foods that bring them pleasure. The goal is not perfection but adequacy, patterns of eating that provide sufficient support for health while remaining enjoyable enough to maintain indefinitely. This usually involves compromise, adaptation, and the recognition that different people will achieve the same ends through different means. The integration of knowledge. The information available about healthy aging has never been more abundant. Yet abundance brings its own challenges. Contradictory claims compete for attention. Simplistic solutions promise more than they can deliver. The sheer volume of guidance can overwhelm rather than inform. Stepping back from the specifics reveals underlying patterns that remain consistent across cultures, across time, and across individual variations. These patterns form the foundation upon which all more detailed advice must rest. The first pattern involves eating real food, primarily plants and animals, prepared simply. This means minimizing ultra-processed products that combine isolated ingredients, additives, and refined components in ways that bear little resemblance to anything found in nature. It does not require perfection. Processed foods appear in most diets occasionally, but establishes a clear priority for whole foods as the foundation of eating. The second pattern involves moving regularly, in varied ways, throughout life. This means building activity into daily routines rather than compartmentalizing it into scheduled exercise sessions. Walking for transportation, gardening for food, climbing stairs by choice, standing while working when possible. These small accumulations of movement add up to more total benefit than brief periods of intense effort surrounded by prolonged sitting. The third pattern involves sleeping sufficiently and consistently, honoring the body's need for restoration. This means protecting sleep time from the encroachment of entertainment or work, creating environments conducive to rest, and respecting the natural rhythms that regulate when sleep comes easily and when it does not. The fourth pattern involves maintaining connection to other people, to meaningful activities, to purposes larger than oneself. This means investing in relationships, participating in community, engaging with work or volunteer activities that provide sense of contribution. The evidence linking social integration to health outcomes grows stronger with each passing year, suggesting that isolation may be as damaging to long-term health as any physical risk factor. The fifth pattern involves managing stress through practices that calm the nervous system. This means recognizing when activation has become chronic and intentionally invoking the relaxation response through whatever means: work, meditation, time in nature, deep breathing, creative expression, spiritual practice. The body cannot distinguish between life-threatening emergencies and modern chronic stressors. Both trigger the same physiological responses, and both require active countermeasures to prevent cumulative damage. The sixth pattern involves paying attention to environment, the air, water, light, and chemicals that surround us. This means making choices where possible to reduce exposures, while recognizing that complete control is neither possible nor necessary. Small improvements accumulate. The practical path. Translating these patterns into daily life requires neither perfection nor dramatic transformation. Small changes, consistently applied, produce more lasting results than ambitious overhauls that cannot be sustained. The path forward involves identifying one or two areas where improvement feels possible and beginning there. For someone who currently eats few vegetables, adding a single serving daily, perhaps berries with breakfast, a salad at lunch, or roasted vegetables with dinner, creates meaningful change without overwhelming. For someone who exercises rarely, a daily 10-minute walk provides entry into movement without requiring equipment or special clothing. For someone whose sleep suffers from evening screen use, turning off devices 30 minutes before bed establishes a boundary that supports rest. These modest beginnings matter because they demonstrate that change is possible. Success in one area often spills over into others. Better sleep improves energy for movement. More movement increases appetite for nutritious food. Better nutrition supports stress resilience. The body operates as an integrated system, and improvements anywhere tend to support improvements everywhere. Over time, these small changes accumulate into patterns that define a different way of living. The person who walked 10 minutes daily now walks 30, and then adds variety through other activities. The person who added one vegetable now eats several, and then begins exploring new varieties and preparations. The person who turned off screens before bed now has an evening routine that supports rest, and then finds themselves sleeping more soundly through the night. This gradual evolution, sustained over years, produces outcomes that no single intervention could achieve. The body, given consistent support across multiple dimensions, gradually shifts its trajectory. Decline does not reverse. Aging remains unidirectional, but the rate of decline moderates. The margin of safety widens, and the experience of daily life improves in ways both large and subtle. The larger perspective, stepping back further still, beyond the specifics of any individual's choices, lies a perspective that encompasses the entire human journey through time. Aging is not a problem to be solved, but a process to be accompanied. The goal is not to defeat time, but to move through it with as much function, connection, and meaning as possible. This perspective shifts the focus from extension to experience. The question becomes not how many years can be added, but how fully each year can be lived. What activities bring joy? What relationships matter most? What contributions feel meaningful? These questions, which have little to do with biology, ultimately determine the quality of the aging experience more than any measure of cellular function. The nutritional and lifestyle practices that support healthy aging matter precisely because they enable continued engagement with what matters. The person who maintains mobility can continue walking in places they love. The person who preserves cognitive function can remain engaged with ideas and people that stimulate them. The person who sustains energy can keep contributing to causes and communities they value. This is the deeper purpose behind attending to the details of how we live, not to achieve some abstract measure of longevity, but to preserve the capacity for a life worth living. Not to avoid death, which remains certain, but to compress the period of disability and dependence that too often precedes it. Not to become immortal, but to remain fully ourselves for as long as possible. The wisdom of moderation in the pursuit of healthy aging. Enthusiasm can sometimes overwhelm judgment. The person who discovers nutrition may begin eliminating entire food groups. The person who embraces exercise may push too hard too fast. The person who learns about supplements may accumulate bottles of compounds with uncertain effects and unknown interactions. Moderation, that most ancient of virtues, applies here as fully as anywhere. The optimal approach lies not in extreme restriction or aggressive intervention, but in consistent, moderate practices sustained over time. This means eating well without becoming obsessive about every meal, moving regularly without training for competitions, sleeping sufficiently without worrying about every imperfect night, connecting with others without demanding constant social engagement. The body, for all its complexity, responds better to gentle consistency than to dramatic intervention. It adapts gradually to the demands placed upon it, whether those demands involve nutrition, activity, or rest. Pushing too hard triggers stress responses that counteract the intended benefits. Relaxing into sustainable patterns allows adaptation to occur naturally, without resistance. This principle applies particularly to those in later decades, when the body's capacity for rapid adaptation has diminished, but its ability to respond to consistent support remains robust. The 60-year-old who begins walking daily will not develop the cardiovascular capacity of a 30-year-old athlete, but will experience meaningful improvements in function and well-being. The 70-year-old who improves their vegetable intake will not reverse all age-related changes, but will provide their cells with support that moderates further decline. These realistic expectations matter because they prevent the discouragement that comes from comparing oneself to unrealistic standards. Progress, not perfection, is the appropriate measure. Improvement relative to one's own baseline, not achievement of some external ideal. Defines success. The continuing journey, the exploration of how to age while never reaches a final destination. New research emerges, refining understanding of mechanisms and interventions. Personal circumstances change, requiring adjustments to strategies that once worked well. The body itself continues evolving, presenting new challenges and new opportunities for support. This ongoing process mirrors the nature of life itself, which is never static but always in motion. The person who approaches aging with curiosity rather than fear, with flexibility rather than rigidity, with acceptance rather than denial, positions themselves to navigate whatever comes with greater ease and resilience. The information presented here offers a foundation, a map of the territory that includes the major features worth attending to. But each individual must walk their own path through this territory, discovering which approaches work for their unique body, circumstances, and preferences. The map is not the territory, and the general principles must always be adapted to specific situations. What remains constant is the opportunity. Each day presents choices that shape the trajectory of aging. Each meal offers nourishment that supports cellular function. Each movement stimulates adaptations that preserve capacity. Each connection reinforces the social fabric that buffers against stress. Each moment of rest allows repair and restoration to occur. These choices, repeated thousands of times across years and decades, accumulate into the reality of how we age. Not through dramatic interventions or heroic measures, but through the quiet consistency of daily patterns that either support or undermine the body's remarkable capacity for resilience. The architecture of aging is built one decision at a time, and the power to influence its form remains present at every stage of life. The architecture of aging is not determined by any single meal, any single walk, or any single night of sleep. It is built slowly, decision by decision, across the full landscape of a life. The body remembers everything: the foods you offered it, the movements you asked of it, the rest you allowed it, the connections that sustained it. And in its quiet, patient way, it responds to what you provide. The single most important truth to carry forward is this: how you age is not something that simply happens to you. It is something you participate in every day, through choices so small they seem insignificant until they are added together across years. The body you live in tomorrow is being built by what you do today. If something in this conversation has stirred a thought, raised a question, or simply offered a different way of seeing your own journey, consider sharing that reflection in the comments. The wisdom of healthy aging grows richer when it is shared among those who are walking the same path. And if you would like to continue exploring the ideas collected in this library, we invite you to subscribe. New volumes are added regularly, each one designed to support your understanding of what it means to age with strength, clarity, and purpose. This is the Longevity Library. Listen, learn, and live longer.